Hey guys, what's going on? So today I have a rant video that's definitely going to piss a lot of people off. I'm going to be talking about how with a lot of the newer death metal bands, and I'm not talking about people who are like, oh, I fucking hate modern death metal, and like they think it's still like 2011 and like everyone's still playing tech death and slam, which that's not the case at all. I'm talking about the newer like kind of death doom and like OSDM nostalgia bands. I'm talking about those kind of bands. And first, I want to preface this by saying this: I do not think any of these bands are bad, and I actually enjoy most of them, and I think they're all pretty good bands. But we need some original shit that stands out and isn't a copy of something, or you can tell doesn't have direct. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but I can just start by saying this. A lot of the bands are either really like a lot of the newer old school death metal style bands, like bands that come out on like Dark Descent Records and 20 Black Spin and stuff like that I'm talking about. They either sound really like, cryptic and atmospheric. They sound like, like stuff like Time Ghoul and Incantation, which those bands are great. And the bands that of this style are still pretty good, but there's just a fucking shitload of just a ton of bands that sound exactly the same. So they're either that style or they're a really generic OSDM kind of nostalgia type thing, like stuff like Skeletal Remains or Cyst, which I actually really enjoyed Skeletal Remains when I first discovered them about like a year ago. When I think the album's called Devouring Mortality. When that came out, I was really hyped about that album, and I really enjoyed it. But with time, I came to realize it's basically just a regurgitation of, all the 90s stuff. It sounds exactly like Pestilence and Morbid Angel and Obituary. That's fucking boring. I'd rather just listen to Pestilence, Morbid Angel, and Obituary. I love old school death metal from, the early 90s. But if I want to listen to old school death metal, I'd rather listen to early 90s bands than just newer bands trying to sound like that. It's like the same shit that happened with thrash metal with all the, the newer like shitty, they're not really new anymore, but like the new wave of thrash metal bands that are all pretty generic. It's like the same thing is happening to death metal now, and it's kind of lame because like I don't know, I love death metal because it's like such an ever evolving genre. You go from like the really thrashy early stuff like Possessed and early Death and early Morbid Angel, and then shit got a little bit heavier, stuff like Cannibal Corpse and Suffocation and early Gorguts and Malevolent Creation, all the classic early 90s bands, and then you got like early brutal death metal, like Deeds of Flesh and Internal Bleeding and shit like that. And then you also got like, technical death metal, like the early stuff like Cynic and Atheist. You got a little bit of early death doom, like some, Incantation or Autopsies, Metal Funeral. It was pretty mixed up, and stuff was evolving over like the 90s, and in the 2000s you had a lot of like more, kind of slam bands and some technical death metal stuff. Just the genre never like completely died out. Like what happens to a lot of metal genres, especially like thrash metal, that happened to thrash metal. It kind of died in the 90s as far as popularity and evolution. What I'm trying to say is death metal is ever evolving, but at this point I feel like it's starting to, for like the past like 5 years, I'd say not 5, but like 4 years or 3 or 4 years, it's kind of hit like this weird like era of just generic bands that are regurgitating old shit. I don't know. And the other thing is there's like this like hype cycle going on too, where like a new band will come out and they'll have an album coming out through like an underground label, and they're like an underground band that nobody's heard of, and it's super hyped and everyone's all excited about it because they heard their demo and everyone is obsessed with their demos. And there's a bunch of hype and the album comes out, and then the hype is like super crazy when the album comes out and everyone is all talking about it, and then the hype dies down and moves on to another band. The same thing happens, and then the band just kind of gets lost and forgotten. Which that's happening with death metal, and it's fucking lame. I'd rather people focus on a band and stick with that band rather than just kind of what the hype. I'm just sick of hype for new releases from all these like obscure underground bands, and then it comes out and it doesn't live up to the hype because it ends up just sounding exactly like another band that's doing that same incantation-y, Time Ghoul inspired kind of doomy OSDM style shit. Which, don't get me wrong, I think these bands are pretty good. They're enjoyable and it's nice, but it's not that original. Because I do enjoy that style very much. I love almost any kind of death metal, but it's not original or innovative in any way, in my opinion. I know a lot of people really like Blood Incantation and are super hyped about the new album, and I think Blood Incantation is a very good band, but like the hype is getting really fucking annoying, and it's not making me want to listen to the new album. Because Blood Incantation is great, but they weren't really doing anything super. I mean, they definitely stick out a little bit, but they weren't doing anything super like overly innovative with their debut album, which I do think is a great album, but it's not like fucking revolutionary or anything. They're basically playing a really similar style of like early Incantation and Time Ghoul mixed with like a little bit of like psychedelic stuff, but it's nothing super crazy. And there's a lot of these newer bands, their riff styles are really fucking similar. They have like that like Autopsy, Metal Funeral era kind of eerie sounding melodies. They all have this same production. It's this really earthy sounding production. It's very clean, but not pristine clean. Like, it's like dirty sounding, but the drums sound like not triggered at all. Like, the drums sound very natural. And again, I don't hate this production, but just so many bands have the same sounding production. My biggest complaint with this style, though, is the vocals. They're not bad vocals. They're not good. They're not great vocals. They're just okay death metal vocals. A lot of these bands are all have the same wannabe Craig Pillard style of vocals. That's like really there's a little bit of reverb on it. It's kind of low. It's like a mixture of like incantation vocals and bolt thrower vocals. And it's like it's not bad, but it's very backgroundy and it feels very like unrecognizable because so many bands have this vocal style. Like, I'll just show like clips from like 3 or 4 bands right now that all have this vocal style. Like right now, like here you go. So yeah, like, how do all those vocals not sound the same to you? Like, fucking, they're not bad vocals. They sound decent, but they're not like, I feel like they're just vocals for the sake of having vocals there, in my opinion. That's what they sound like. They don't sound like vocals like that genuinely really add anything to the music. And yeah, they all just sound really samey and they're not very recognizable. Like, if you look at, a lot of classic, really popular or iconic death metal bands, one of the biggest reasons of why they're iconic is because their vocals are so recognizable. Like, if you listen to like an Obituary song, you instantly know. You hear John Tardy's voice, you're like, yep, that's fucking Obituary. You hear say Devourment, for another example. You instantly know. You hear Ruben Rosas' vocals and the production style on like Molesting the Decapitated, and you're like, yep, that's definitely Devourment. Or say like you hear like Asphyx or Pestilence, you instantly know that's Asphyx or Pestilence because the vocals are really recognizable and they're unique vocals. Everyone was doing different style of vocals. Cryptopsy, again, really unique style of vocals, but so many bands are just recycling that same vocal style, that same style of production. And I feel like it's getting really fucking boring. I wish that there are some new bands, which I will talk about in a minute, that are doing some slightly more unique shit, which I really enjoy. And like I said, I'm enjoying all these. I'm not trying to talk shit or start drama or anything. I do enjoy pretty much all these bands. I think they're good bands. I really like Tomb Mold. I like Brain Fart. I like Blood Incantation. I like Hyperdontia. They're all pretty cool bands and they sound good, but they're not that unique, in my opinion. And just the hype cycles are fucking annoying. And the riffs are all really samey. It's a good style, but it's just getting really overdone. And I don't know. And it's kind of like with thrash, how it just kind of became like a trend. Like a trendy style, at least. If you're on Dark Descent Records or 20 Buck Spin, Some people will say Maggot Stomp, but I think Maggot Stomp's bands are a little bit more. They have a lot of different sounding bands that are still at a similar style, but they're not as generic in my opinion. I actually really enjoy Maggot Stomp. But a lot of these like Dark Descent, 20 Buck Spins type bands, they sound really all similar. And I don't know, I'm just sick of the hype cycles, and I keep repeating myself, but it's getting fucking boring. And they all have the same natural drum sound, same guitar riffs, and I already explained same vocals. And I also miss when death metal was more like... I miss when death metal was less about being atmospheric and cryptic sounding. And I like... Death metal is more about that now. I miss when it was more like about being heavy and juvenile sound, like having these like stupid juvenile lyrics and being fucking brutal. Like, yeah, it was kind of stupid at times, but there was so much charm to it, and it's a lot more interesting to me than hearing another band sing about like fucking, I don't know, like freaking just like cosmic shit. Like, that's just getting so boring to me, and that sounds so like pretentious. And that's not what death metal is about. Death metal is about being, extreme and nasty and heavy. Which that's not... Well, I don't want to say that it's all about that, and that's the point of the genre. But there's not enough bands that are about that anymore, and it's starting to shift to be more about being atmospheric and fucking, like... That's cool and all, and that's a cool concept, but I just miss when death metal bands were doing some more, like... I just miss when death metal bands were a little bit more juvenile with their shit. That could just be me. I know a lot of people fucking hate, like... black humor, like gore lyrics, like stuff like Skinless, which I love stuff like that. But what I'm saying is, like, I miss the days of, like, fucking, I'm trying to think of an example of, like, bands like this. Like, like Suffocation and, like, Deeds of Flesh and, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of just examples of bands with these kind of lyrics. Like early Dying Fetus, early Cannibal Corpse. I miss when bands still have that edge, and a lot of these bands don't have that edge, and they replace it with just it sounding like having these like tripped out lyrics about fucking like stars and shit or whatever. Either that or having really, really generic but boring, not gore, but like horror-ish inspired lyrics are just about being like, I don't know, they're just about like just sounding like gross, slimy stuff in the sewers. I don't know. Whatever. I don't know. Just a lot of these bands are getting boring to me, and I just feel like I need to say it because I'm not hearing anyone else say this. They're still good bands, but there needs to be some variation in this style, And lastly, I want to talk about some new bands that stand out, in my opinion. I thought of 5 bands. There's definitely more, but the ones I could think of at the top of my head before I made this video, that, in my opinion, are either doing a variation of the style that's more unique, or just a newer death metal band that's doing something that's a little bit different in general, and that is definitely very either innovative or is just really just well done without being generic. So the first of these bands I want to talk about is Encoffinized. Now, they are kind of OSDM-y, but they have elements of some brutal death metal in there, and they have this kind of groove that none of these bands have. That's really fucking just makes the songs catchy. They're really simple and in almost a punky way. I don't want to say a punky way, but they have these really simple and fun songs that do sound, nasty and like kind of atmospheric, but they're still very fun. They don't sound overly pretentious and atmospheric. It's just really fun, heavy, groovy, nasty death metal. You've got elements of like old school death metal. Sorry about my dog barking. But you also got elements of a little bit of brutal death metal, just some groove in there. And their new album, well, it's not new anymore, but their album that came out this year, I think it's a great album. Next band I want to talk about is Cranial Engorgement, newer brutal death metal band. They play like kind of an old school style of brutal death metal, but with some modern production and a little bit of melody in there. And it just sounds really fucking like crushing. If you like Dying Fetus, you'll definitely like this band. Really aggressive, but also really catchy and groovy shit. If you like old school style brutal death metal and you don't like the newer, like kind of slamcore kind of bands, you'll like this band because this band does not sound like that. And they're just a great band. Next band I want to talk about is Pissgrave. They mix old school death metal, like kind of like Deicide and Cryptopsy, with like war metal shit like Revenge and like Archgoat and Blasphemy. Imagine if you mixed like Cryptopsy and Revenge with just a little bit of like gore grind style aesthetic, and that's what you get with Pissgrave. Their album that came out this year, Posthumous Humiliation, is like fucking some good shit. It's like, it's so fucking nasty. I just love that album, and Pissgrave is just a really nasty band. And you know, there's some bands that I've done like that gore grindy shit before, but this band has a new spin on it. You know, they're mixing old school death metal with like bestial black metal, and that's just such a cool combination, and it just sounds in your face and aggressive and like disgusting. Next band I want to talk about is Disentomb, another new-ish brutal death metal band. None of these bands I'm talking about are like super new and like you know, like up and coming, but these bands are new-ish bands that have come out within the last 10 years or less that are just a little bit more unique in my opinion. Disentomb mixes like Disgorge, Defeated Sanity style brutal death metal, the really technical shit with a lot of blast beats, with funeral doom style melodies, which is really fucking cool. It's like very adventurous sounding, a little atmospheric. It's got a little bit of emotion put into it, and it's just some really like just when you listen to their album Misery, like that's their best album in my opinion. That album feels like a fucking journey when you listen to it. I just think it's a great fucking release. So Disentomb is great. Last band I want to talk about is Ascended Dead. Now this is a band that has a variant on the newer OSDM style. So they are kind of part of that scene of bands. The difference though for me with them is their vocals. They don't have that generic incantation-y vocal style. Their vocals kind of sound like Lord Worm from Cryptopsy, but without ripping them off, but they have that same like psychotic energy. So I think Ascended Dead is another great band that's kind of newish. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about with this rant video, though. It's just a lot of bands are getting generic, and it's kind of making me kind of bored, because I want some new releases that stand out a bit more, or more innovative, that, you know, we'll be talking about within the next, like, 5 to 10 years. And I just feel like there's not enough bands that are like that coming out now. But yeah, so that's it for this video, though. If you agree with me, that's great. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. I'm not dissing any of these bands. I enjoy these bands. I just think that they're all starting to sound kind of samey, and it's getting a little boring. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, though. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Bye.